Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Chapter 2, Comparing Two Proportions. So we're going to get started today with Lesson 1, which we have two objectives for you that I would like you to be able to do by the end of the lesson. The first is create a two-way table to summarize an athletic performance. And the second one is to be able to state both parts of a hypothesis. So we're going to get started here by quickly looking back at Chapter 1, okay, where we examined if an athlete or team's ability increased or decreased from an earlier time period to a later one. So we had you guys looking at the regular season versus the playoffs. In this chapter, we're going to examine if the athlete or team had a greater ability in one context or the other, but it'll be during the same period of time. So a couple of examples of that. The first one is a baseball player's ability to hit. Is it greater against a left-handed pitcher or a right-handed pitcher during their career? Or a single season for that matter. If a team's ability to win at home is greater than a team's ability to win on the road during the regular season. So we're looking at, like I said, the same exact time period, but two different contexts within that time period. So let's start off by talking about home field advantage. Okay, this is something that's talked about a lot, the home field advantage. You hear about it in the NFL, especially like with the Seahawks and some of these other teams. And college, they talk about going to Iowa and having to play football out of the pink, locker room. So is home field advantage a thing or not? Now, we're not going to look at the entire NFL. We're just going to stick with one particular team. In this particular time, we're going to look at the 2019 Minnesota Vikings. This data lends itself to easily be able to be looked at. So when we look at this, right, we have our wins and losses for both at home, on the road, and then their totals. Okay, this is what's known as a two-way table or a contingency table. So this was the first objective that I want you guys to make sure that you can create, is one of these tables given this type of information. Okay, because we're going to break down that information and use it to then be able to determine if in fact, okay, it is by random chance, or if they do have a greater ability to win games at home than what they do on the road. So I just bringing that table over to the next slide. Okay, we're going to look at this, right, in the two different contexts. So as you can see, right, their overall record was 10-6. That's all the way over to the right, 10 wins, 6 losses out of a total of 16 games. Okay, and then in each individual column, you can see that means 6 wins at home and only 2 losses were on the road. They were both 4-4. So the next thing we want to do is, okay, well, we need to look at winning percentage, right? We learned last chapter, we always need to look at percentages and not just raw data when we're looking at this type of information. So we want to do that, right? We take the number of games they won and divide it by the total number of games that they played. So, right, that'll give us a nice decimal. And then if we multiply that decimal by 100, that will get us to an actual winning percentage. So let's go ahead and take that same data and calculate those winning percentages. So our overall, we did 10 out of 16. So we multiply that by 100, and that gets us to 62.5%. Now, if we take the home, we won 6 out of 8 total home games, which is 75% when we multiply it by that 100. And then for the road, we had 4 wins out of 8 total games. Multiply that by 100, and we get 50%. So right now, looking at it overall, you can clearly see that they seem to do better at home, but we can't say why yet. Okay, so what other ways can we look at to compare these performances? Well, of course, segmented bar chart, right? We did a lot of those in chapter 1. So we have this nice segmented bar chart here. You can see on the left-hand side, it's your percentages, which is extremely important, right? We have our home wins and losses as opposed to our away wins and losses for the 2019 Minnesota Vikings. Again, this graph seems to very clearly show, right, that the ability, there is difference. At least there's evidence. But what we have to remember, okay, is that, right, we're talking about performance versus ability, right? So if the Vikings could continue playing infinitely long season, right, for 2019 in the same exact conditions, their overall win percentage would eventually, right, create that ability to win at home. But obviously that's impossible to do. We can't do that. So we have to look at, okay, this is what their performance was at home and their actual performance on the road, and then trying to determine, okay, well, if we were to replay this over and over again, would random chance be the reason? Now, when we look at this, right, we have one of two options, right? Either A, they were better, or B, they were not better at home. And if they're not better at home, that means it's random chance, right? So our first claim is that they have the same exact ability to win at home and on the road, right? It's just total random chance. Our second claim would be the Vikings have a greater ability to win at home than they do on the road. And that is in large part because we really have to look at this. Okay, stats kind of works like our judicial system. Okay, in a court of law, right, you're innocent until proven guilty. Same thing here. Okay, we have to use convincing evidence, right, to say that it's not just random chance, just like they have to use convincing evidence to claim that somebody is guilty. Okay, so we have to start with that assumption that the Vikings had the same ability at home as on the road, and it was just random chance. Okay, then we make simulations, right, where we can then show the difference in performance is either unlikely to occur or is likely to occur, right? So if it's unlikely to occur, right, then that will give us that convincing evidence that the Vikings had a greater ability to win at home. And just like in the past, we're going to use that 5% when we get there. We're not there yet, guys. Okay, so our next step, okay, comes into actually formalizing those claims, right? We talked about the two claims. They either have the same ability and it's because of random chance, or they don't. So we call that stating our hypotheses. Okay, and so there are two parts, two competing claims anytime that you write a hypothesis. So if you only have one, you haven't done it right. Okay, you've got to have two parts to it. Okay, the first part is the null hypotheses. This is kind of the we have to say that they're innocent one. Okay, this is the initial belief that there has been no change in ability and there's no difference, okay, between the two contexts. It's just simply that random chance. Okay, this is known as the null hypothesis, which is denoted is H sub 0 there. Okay, and so you can see the H with the little 0 down, and you can either read that as H naught or H sub 0, but it is referring to the null hypothesis. Okay, then on the other hand, right, we have our alternative hypothesis, and that describes what we want to establish or what we may suspect is true, and that's our alternative hypothesis, and it's denoted as H sub A, which again just refers back to the alternative hypothesis. So let's formally state the hypothesis that we talked about earlier in our claims, right? So for our null hypothesis, we're going to say that the 2019 Vikings have the same ability to win at home and on the road. Whereas our alternative hypothesis, right, the thing that we think and hope that we'll be able to show is true, is that the alternative, right, the 2019 Vikings have a greater ability to win at home than on the road. Okay, these are very generic statements as far as, have the same ability to win being your null hypothesis, and then either a greater or a lesser ability to win will normally be your alternative hypothesis. Now, some things to keep in mind, okay? As we stated earlier, right, the hypothesis always has to be stated in terms of ability, okay? Not performance, but ability. That's what we're always trying to estimate. Okay, your null hypothesis always has to claim equality. It always has to be that it's the same exact ability, right? There is no difference between the two circumstances that you're looking at. Your alternative hypothesis, that's where you claim that there is that inequality or non-equality, right? So for the most part, it will be greater, but there are times when it is less than, okay? So you have to keep that in mind, right? Null is always the same. Okay. Alternative is always greater or less than. Okay. And so that alternative hypothesis, that's really where we put what we suspect is true, what we hope is true, what we hope we can show. Okay. So then the hypothesis test is actually the formal process used to decide whether your data provides convincing evidence to support that alternative hypothesis. But we're not going to get there. Okay. Not today, at least. Okay, so let's take some practice writing hypotheses, right? That was the second major thing I wanted you guys to be able to do once you've completed this video. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of situations. So for example, one, Okay, we have do golfers have a lower ability to land on the green when it rains? So to investigate this, right, we want to compare the percentage of time landing on the green for Tiger Woods in tournaments when it's rained and in tournaments when it's sunny, right? So those are your different conditions that you're talking about. When it rains, when it's sunny, right? So we'll start off by stating our null hypothesis. And our null hypothesis, if we remember correctly, always has to start off by saying that they're the same, right? There's no difference. Okay, so our null hypothesis states Tiger Woods has the same ability to land on the green when it rains as he does when it's sunny. Okay, now the alternative hypothesis, that's where we're stating what we think it should be or what we're hoping to show it should be, right? So the alternative hypothesis says that Tiger Woods has a lower ability to land on the green when it rains than when it's sunny. Okay, so again, right, your null hypothesis, notice it's the same ability in both conditions. When it rains is when it's sunny. Okay, and in the bottom one or alternative hypothesis, right, his ability is lower, okay, to land on the green when it rains than when it's sunny. All right, let's take a look at one more example before I turn you loose on the problems for you to work on. Okay, so do quarterbacks have a greater ability to complete passes at home as opposed to on the road? So to investigate, right, we're going to compare the pass completion percentage for Shane Falco. Okay, so of the Washington Sentinels, okay, in games at home and in games on the road. So we're going to state the null and alternative hypothesis for investigating this claim. Go ahead and pause this. Write down what you feel the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis are, and then hit play and see how well you did. All right, so let's take a look, right? That null hypothesis has to be they have that same ability. So it's Shane Falco has the same ability to complete passes at home as he does on the road. Boom. Okay, the alternative hypothesis, right? That's the one that we think is going to be, or we hope to show through our trials. Okay, so that one, the alternative hypothesis, right? That's where there's a difference. So we're saying that Shane Falco has a greater ability to complete passes at home, right, than on the road. Okay, so just remember that, right? There's two parts to every one. The null is always that they have the same ability in both conditions. And the alternative is always a different ability, whether it be greater than or less than, okay? And that's based upon what the conditions are. If you have any questions, just make sure you let me know and I'll be happy to answer them. I hope that you found this video informational and helpful.